in this.
I'm taking you live right now. Hey, everybody, it's Brad Montgomery. How are you? Good morning. I missed you. Good day. Do you feel like you need a laugh? Do you feel like you're overwhelmed? Do you feel like you want to hear from one of the smartest working pros out there? Well, goody for us. Rik Roberts is in the house. Rik, good
How's
morning.
it going,
Thanks
Brad?
for joining us.
I'm excited to jump on and talk to some good people today, and you are the best one I know at this moment for sure.
Yeah, of all the people in this conversation so far, you're the funniest.
You're the one.
Well, hi. How are you? So,
I'm doing good.
I don't even know where to start. I have so many questions from you, or about you. First, tell us what you do for fun, because I like to start kind of at the end.
Oh, for fun, I'm getting ready to do it here. When we wrap up, I'm going to hit the trails today and ride my bike. We've got a 61-degree day here in the middle of January in Nashville, Tennessee. So I'm going to see if I can go for 50 or 60 miles out there and just get some exercise in, because it's supposed to snow tomorrow. So take advantage of it.
It's snowing right here. Are we talking road biking, mountain biking?
Yeah, road bike, and I'll hop on some greenway trails, and then I'll go from my house, which is 26 miles from downtown, ride to downtown, around downtown, turn around and come back.
Dang it! I just got a new bike, Rik, a pandemic purchase. And I've been, when I ride, I've been riding 20 and 30 miles, and I feel so badass. And you just said 60 miles. Duh,
Well, you have to
impressive.
have the time. I mean, I'm sure you got the skills and the muscles built up to go for 30 or 40, quite often. But 50 or 60, you need to say goodbye to the family for the afternoon and go do it.
Yeah. I've been struggling. I promise we'll get to comedy. I've been struggling, Rik, with warmth, meaning it's cold here, so often I'm riding at 40 miles or 40 degrees. I can't figure out how to stay warm because of the sweat management, and I just feel like such a hobbyist hack.
No, I struggle with that quite a bit, especially when it's 40 or below, because you got to bundle up. So first couple of layers, I do these breathable, I don't even know what the material it is, but they're breathable. And then I throw on something that's heavy cotton, like a thick jersey cotton thing. And then I'll go another couple of layers of almost unbreathable stuff to keep it in. Oh, tell Tracy I did get a new bike, because she kept slamming me for having some real hacky bikes. But now I've got a Trek road bike. It's 18 pounds, and I did 100 miles on it this summer. And I couldn't have done that on the bike I had, which was 43 pounds. And it was great to work up on that bike because it got me strong.
Right.
But I just couldn't go distance without just my legs and my knees feeling like they're going to fall apart.
I guess that's
But
like
anyway,
those baseball players who swing with 3 bats and then they go up there with 1 bat.
that's exactly it. But back to your question about heat management, Tracy will know really good because she's in your area, I think. But the last outer layer has to have a breathable back, like a flap, to let that heat out, so you don't build up just 10 pounds of moisture with all the clothes you're wearing underneath.
Right. I hadn't thought about that. So you're wind resistant on the front where it's so cold, and then your back. Oh.
Yeah,
I
it's
can't
either
believe
a
I haven't
flap.
called Tracy. Jeez, what was I thinking?
You'll know. It's got like arm vents underneath your armpits there, and usually right down the middle of your back to let that out, so that you just don't. Because if you stop for 5 minutes and stretch, you get back in, you're freezing because all that stuff is cooled off.
Tracy said she's going to help me. Thank you, Tracy.
Huh.
Yeah, it's fun. Because my deal with biking was almost no interest until there was a pandemic and all the other things I could do to exercise. And exercise for all of us, including me, helps us manage stuff, right? Including stress. So I was like, I bought a bike.
Yeah, no, I did the same thing. I started running in March, and I ran until I got that plantar fasciitis deal. Then I couldn't run anymore, but biking actually kind of warmed up that muscle and helped. So just now over the planners, but the biking is just something I didn't expect to do, but ended up really getting into it.
Same trip. I wonder how many people like us, Rik. There must be so many people who said, "Oh, I can run," and then we screwed up our feet with planters.
Yeah, I just went too fast and too soon and didn't stretch out the right way. And plus, I'm 52, so that might play into it. I know you can get that at any age, but at 52, it seems like it's more prevalent. Or I just know 52-year-old people a lot. Maybe that's it. And everybody I know got it. But I'm so competitive. Like I got down to where I was doing like a 6:23 mile or something like that. And I'm like, I'm going to get under 5 here if I keep going. And then that's the day I blew out my arch.
Um, yeah. Okay. I'm just like you. Only you go faster and longer.
But then I can't go at all. So like there's a lesson that I learned this summer. I got a whole new keynote out of it, and I think I can write my bike off. I have to check into that with my tax guy.
Well, I think we have similar personalities in that we started a job that is crazy, and made it work for long enough to make us feel like I guess we're pretty good at this. And you also said you're competitive. So, are those related? Like your competitive wanting to go under 5 miles for running and being able to make this thing work in a weird, difficult business?
Maybe, I haven't really thought about it that way. I don't feel like I'm competitive with other speakers or comedians. Like I kind of learned many years ago, there's plenty of gigs out there. You don't always know how to get them or make the right connections to get them, but there's enough for everybody. So I gave up on that. But I do like to look at last year's numbers and try to get better this year. And sometimes those numbers are less gigs. Maybe it's to do less and have a better life. I've learned that this past year. But I'm competitive when it comes to, getting like on the bike, I'm trying to get to where I can go 20 miles an hour for more minutes, more miles. I can do that for about 5 miles and then I start to fade off. But I want to get to where I can do that for 10 miles. And then that will raise my average up from 15 to, which is where I started this summer on the mountain bike. I'm like at 18 now, but I want to keep moving it up or else at that point, it's just a hobby if I don't have goals. So I guess that's what separates a goal from an achievement for me.
Oh, that's so fascinating. I'm trying to make a parallel between what you and I are doing with exercise to what we're doing in our jobs. And I'm failing a little bit because when I'm on a bike, I'm looking around.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that. And I'll stop sometimes, meaning I'm not pushing it that hard. But in work, I kind of feel like I push it. I wonder.
Well, I think there's room for both. Like I know when I first started riding the bike, it was all just about discovery. Like here's how sad my life was before the pandemic. Is I live less than 1.5 miles from a mountain bike trail that goes 8.5 miles, and it's all kind of contained in this one area that used to be a campground.
Right.
I didn't know it was there for 12 years. I had no idea. And then as I started riding my bike, I was taking my bike all around places, and then I started Googling places to ride your mountain bike, and it goes, right by your house, dummy. That place, it's on the left. You can ride your bike to it, dummy. And so, in that first phase, I was just discovering how these different greenways connected and how I could, I didn't know that I could get from my house basically to downtown Nashville and only have one little section where it's kind of dangerous, but it's only for a mile. You know what I mean? So, but yeah. once you get going and once you've gone by the same paths a lot, you do kind of put your head down. But there's a lesson there too that I kind of discovered as the seasons changed is, these fields that were overgrown and the deer would pop their head out and you might see a deer. In the fall they bale this stuff up and now you can see acres and acres of land you never got to see before. And now that the trees are thinning out, I can see the river and the lake's much clearer. And I'm going to enjoy this season of riding because when spring comes and the trees fill back in and the fields grow up, I'll miss some of what I saw. So I'm just constantly discovering things. And so there's days of the week where speed is not the issue or that I'm chasing and distance. It's just going out and just observing. And when you do that, I think with your business and with your riding, you'll find new ways to serve people. It happens whether you know it or not.
That, ladies and gentlemen, is a tie-in. Mic drop. All right, let's move to comedy.
Yes, sir.
I'm really curious to hear how you got started because my path through comedy was so indirect. It's not what I read about with when I listen to comic podcasts, for example, yours. I think my path was different. Did you do the old school just open mic nights over and over again and then hammer it as an opener and move to middle?
I did all of it. My initial way to get into comedy, I didn't plan on doing comedy whatsoever. I'd gone to an open stage night that I thought was for poets and for guitarists. and I signed up. And it's at a bar, it's a restaurant side room on a Sunday night, started at 10 o'clock. But I signed up and I thought I'll play a couple tunes, I was somewhat adept on the acoustic and could sort of sing, especially at 10 o'clock on a Sunday, it would pass.
Right.
And so I sign up and there's no sign that says comedy anywhere. And the lady that signed me up goes, well, it's kind of an ongoing thing. And it's sort of like a contest. People will vote on your performance, but don't stress out about that. But if you have votes, you go later in the show. Since you've never been here, you'll go up first. So she still never says the word comedy. The MC for the night never said the word comedy. He just says, we've got a lot of great people in the room tonight. Let's get them going. And he introduced me, and I do 3 songs to complete silence because they're waiting for comedy. I'm doing Simon and Garfunkel. It's not clicking. And then as I was getting ready to get done, I was looking at my watch. I'm like, I got 2 more minutes. What should I do? I asked the crowd, what do y'all want to hear? And they yelled out, using many expletives. The end of it was something funny.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, something funny. So I wrote a couple of funny songs in college, pulled one of those out, did it, and they kind of chuckled. And then when I was leaving, the MC goes, did you have any idea that this was a comedy contest? And I'm like, what? And I literally almost felt like passing out. I could not believe that I was in a spot that I didn't belong at all. And so I grabbed my guitar, my case, and I ran to the parking lot. And I was literally in my truck, and 2 guys came out who ended up being my roommates down the road. But I never met these guys. They're like, dude, that was like Andy Kaufman, man. We know what you were doing. And I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, you were trying not to get a laugh. You were trying to confuse us, but we know what you were doing. That's brilliant. And I'm like, no, I really thought I was supposed to be playing guitar. But they convinced me to come back in. They said, first off, if you're not coming back in, you either get 2 beers or a sandwich from the bar for performing. So if you're not coming back in, can we have that? I'm like, well, I'm going to come back in for that.
Yeah.
So I went back in and I watched 17, 20 comedians go up and do 5 to 10 minutes apiece. And as it got later, the people who were better went on because they had more votes in this contest. And the last 3 or 4, they've been on HBO, Showtime, this kind of stuff. They were just local guys working out their material. And I'm like, I'm coming back next week and writing some jokes. And so I did exactly what you're saying, went to the open mics everywhere but the comedy club. When I got good at that, I went to the comedy club, did the open mics, started going to other cities, and worked my way up. Worked with an improv group. They hired me full time. So 6 months into comedy,
wow,
I quit my job and went full time with an improv troupe that traveled the entire country and did that for a decade.
What was the name of that troupe?
Midwest Comedy Tool and Die out of Columbus, Ohio. Some of the members, one of our members is teaching comedy curriculum at Columbia University, I think it is. And we've got another one that he's writing for Kevin James, and he's written for TV shows. He's still active. Just a bunch of creative dudes, and we stuck around for about 7 to 10 years before we all kind of started doing our own things more.
And what kind of venues, when you were traveling with that improv group, where were you working?
We did primarily comedy clubs, so we'd come into an improv, and instead of them having a 3-act show, we would just do the whole show.
Right.
One of us, usually I would MC 5 or 10 minutes up front, kind of get the crowd warmed up, and then bring out the cast, and we would do 90 minutes to 100 minutes nonstop, focus on punchlines, not so much the theatrical aspects of improv. And we did some theaters there towards the end, all kinds of fun stuff with that. We did corporate events. That's kind of where I learned a little bit about doing corporate entertainment, but tons of fun. And just everything has been kind of a happy accident, kind of a Bob Ross life here. Just one thing led to another, and comedy led to speaking.
And how old were you? Was this like right at the beginning of your life?
Yeah,
adulthood?
I got lucky in the sense that I was really young, right out of college. I think 6 months out of college, I fell into this. And then, a year after college, this was my full-time job. And didn't have the expenses that you have if you try to get into this game earlier. Don't have the patience to, go to places at midnight when the show starts to try out material in front of people who are on their way home, just all that kind of stuff. And looking back, I don't think I would trade anything. I was real broke for a long time, but still managed and still was as happy as I am today as far as being creative,
Yeah, it's funny because I've wondered with my own career if I would have done it if I wasn't young and stupid. Meaning, I didn't really think about what is this and what's the meaning of this and where am I headed. I just thought like that sounds fun. Tuesday, I'll be there. I didn't really think.
That was me too. You came in through magic, if I remember right. Kind of doing that. So you just kind of, when people call you, you go, and when they don't call you, you go to places anyway and show up and hope they put you up on stage. And when you get a couple of dollars, you're like, hey, it's funny. Like your first couple of gigs, you might get like $50 to do a 10-minute set or 20-minute set, and you start doing the math. You're like, man, if I did 60 minutes, that'd be $150 an hour. This beats working anywhere else. But then you don't realize it's hard to get 40 hours of stage time. That's the one thing I tell new comics. They're like, I've done like 10 open mics. I should be good by now, right? I'm like, no. Because you probably did 3 to 5 minutes at each. You've worked less than an hour. It will take you literally your first year of comedy, maybe a year and a half of comedy, to get 40 hours of time on stage. So your first week at this new job of comedy will take you a little bit over a year. And that's if you're hustling pretty hard. Mm. So when people start thinking like that, they're like, oh, yeah, you can't just – you can luck into some things, but you can't luck into a career. You have to pursue it.
I love the internet, partly because I've learned a lot about how other comedians have done this. And I can't tell you, Rik, how jealous I am. Meaning, if I look back at my life, I realize there was a fork in the road and I didn't know it. So I just kept going. And the fork looks like this. I grew up in Denver, Colorado. I was working in comedy clubs, Denver, Colorado, doing opening. And I didn't understand that could be school. I thought that was something you do while you're waiting for the magic gig that pays quite a bit more. So, for example, I'd get hired to do magic at someone's company party for $200. And I'm like, well, I'm going to take that because that is way better than my $40 that I'm going to make here tonight, or 30 or 20 or whatever. And so I'm thinking, I'm so smart. Look at these comics. They're working for $25, for $40. I'm going to go make $125. But I didn't realize that could have been school, and I could have just blown off all of magic and said, do a more traditional route, more open mics. And I didn't see it.
Yeah. I mean, at least it's not a bad thing. I mean, you were doing something that you like to do and you're getting paid for it anyway. It's just comedy was an additional thing that folds into it, but even looking back for me, I could have done so much more learning early on. I mean, all the headliners and feature acts that I worked with when I was a MC, we would go play putt-putt in the afternoon or walk around the mall or something, but I could have, been picking their brain. We didn't have podcasts and the equipment back then to do the stuff we do now. If I started now, I mean, I would get to the edge of annoying everybody I worked with, just trying to learn more from them.
Right.
Give them back as much as I could help, but still.
And if you start now, you could study comedy in a way that wasn't available. I bet you did is what I did. You're going to used record stores to find comedy albums, anything that you could afford. Mm-hmm. Whereas now you just, a $10 membership to Netflix, you have infinite comedy.
Yeah, I tell you, it's so easy now to at least learn off stage. Like you really had to learn everything on stage back in the day. There was very little you could do when you were on stage. But now you're right. If you've got a cell phone and a connection to the internet, you can watch. You could just go back to the very beginning of comedy and watch the old Catskills guys, the vaudeville guys, and work your all the way up. It's unlimited. But also, I would say early on, you do want the ratio of consuming comedy to be greater than exporting comedy out of your brain, because you got to learn what you got to put in first, and not just like what topics, but just how to craft it. But at some point, you need to stop consuming so much and be the person that's producing stuff that other people consume. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because you can stay on podcast all day long, and then you look up like, oh, I don't have any energy to go to the open mic now. But I learned a lot. But you have to put it to use to know that you learned it.
Yeah, it's funny that fast forward to speaking, which I'm going to ask that Trent. Hey, here's a power tip. If you're ever interviewing somebody amazing, I want you to...
I'll take... Hey, Brad, I'm right here. I'm calling you to see if we can be on this call together. Is this better audio than the open mic? There you go.
That's embarrassing. That is awkward.
Okay, I'm going to hang up.
Super awkward. Hey, thanks for turning your phone off there, buddy. Has your phone ever rang on stage?
One time it was perfect timing though. I was doing this productivity keynote. It was a funny keynote, but it was a keynote. And I was talking about taking control of your digital devices and all this stuff. And I said, you've got to determine when you're at work and when you're not at work. And when you're locked in and you're focused and you're in your zone time where you're most productive, you got to turn off your cell phones, turn off your email, and right that moment my phone rings. And it's loud. I mean, I had my ringer on full blast. And the whole audience, they were all nonprofit volunteers up in Michigan. They all just looked at me and I go, or else something like that would happen. And you don't want that to happen. And they thought they thought I planned it.
Like, how did that guy, he must have set a timer or something. How did he get that? It was perfect timing.
Yeah. When I got done, the event planner lady, she goes, you totally forgot to turn your phone off, didn't you? I'm like, yeah, totally did.
Well, it feels like last time I was on stage, but gosh, that was a year ago. So I got 3 kids and we got a family chat group, right? Mm-hmm. And so suddenly the family decides this is a really good time to have a 400 message back and forth about I don't know what. So my pocket's up here and my microphone's right here, and it's going zzz, 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 and I should have. Some days, Rick, the comedy gods are with you, and you're like, oh, this is funny. I'm gonna make this funny. And some days, on this day, my brain was like, I got nothing. I just freaking froze. My brain turned off. Zzz, 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 zzz.
What would you say now? Would you say like my pacemaker's going crazy or something like that, just to let them know that you know that they know?
Dang it, I don't know. What would you say? I got nothing. I still got nothing. I'm calmer now, but I got nothing.
Yeah, I would say something like my defibrillator, my monitor is going. You all can probably hear that.
But they could not hear it. I worried about it, but they couldn't.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, like, I'll just push through because it'll be over, and they can't hear it.
Yeah. Well, those are tough. Those you just got to ignore. But if it gets to be like 400 texts, I think I'd pull my phone out and go, y'all, check this out. I'm in such demand. I'm getting calls while I'm doing. Or just do something kind of silly, and then turn the phone off. So you can get back to it. But here's the great thing about all live performance is everybody knows it's live, and the most real moments in that entire show is the one you didn't plan for, or the audience reaction or interaction you didn't plan on, and people will remember that more than stuff you've crafted for 10 years, no matter how hard and sticky you've made your message and all this. It's that, but he said this, and we knew he came up with it on the spot.
Right.
So I say embrace those. I try to invite those kind of moments in my comedy shows. It's like, give me something that I don't expect and let me see how I work it into the thing and make it a value to the crowd. I just don't want to go up there on autopilot and just fire off jokes because they're jokes.
Well, me too. That's always my favorite part of any job. Like, oh, please let something bad happen. Please let someone shout out. Please let a waiter drop something. Please, just anything.
Right.
Please, please interrupt me with something stupid. But now with virtual, I've been noticing recently that doesn't happen much. Occasionally, but mostly no.
Yeah, I think it's still because we're into it for about a year, most of us. It's still kind of new. I don't think we've got to that second level of comfort that you do when you're on stage. The one thing I like about virtual events that kind of ties in with what we're talking about here is the beauty of it as a performer is if people are in gallery view and they can see everybody else that you're seeing, that's something you can't even do when you're on stage because you can see the entire audience, but they can't see what you're seeing. In virtual, you 100% can. So, without slamming somebody or making fun of them or calling them out for a situation that's out of their control. If you see something in the background that's interesting and you see it as the speaker, I guarantee the people that are sitting there watching the call are looking in there and noticing it too. So you can make reference to something and 100% of the people in the audience knows exactly what you're talking about. On stage, you don't have that option because you're facing this way, they're facing this way.
Right.
A few people might see what you see, but not everybody. So I'm constantly on these virtual events, logging in early. I might have my picture up instead of me there, but I'm looking around saying, what's going on over there? Oh, that guy's a Michigan State fan. Oh, that guy's a Michigan fan. Maybe we can put those against each other or something in the middle of the show. Just little things to kind of, to let them know that you see them. In a live event, you can take a breath and just, you don't want to be full Garth Brooks where you're amazed that people showed up. I don't know if you've ever seen Garth Brooks take the same, but he's just amazed that people are facing, you don't have to be that way. But in a virtual event, you can look around and say, hey, man, I see Bob here. That's pretty cool, but I'm looking forward to this. And they're checking you out. So you kind of have to have that little time. And a lot of virtual events, I think you just get in there like, okay, is everybody logged on? So the main thing we're talking about, you have to
Yeah.
be professional, but you have to also be in the moment. And it's still new, so we're still learning how to do it.
Well, that is exactly right. I feel like I'm back at the beginning where my learning curve is super crazy steep. I just learned that, Rick. Meaning, like 3 months ago, I realized, oh, I should be doing crowd work, even though it's virtual. I should do exactly what you're saying, and it seems obvious now, but it wasn't then. How do you set that up? Do you ever say like, hold on, everyone, put yourself on gallery view because I've got you on gallery view?
Yeah, it's weird. I've learned as I've gone too, and what works for me doesn't always work for others, or even the event planner sometimes. So I default to what they want. But early on, you know, I didn't want the distractions of like dogs barking and babies crying because everybody was working from home,
Right.
and so I literally the first 3 months I turned all the virtual opportunities down, and I just because I'm like, you can't really do you can't do stand-up comedy through the computer. Like I was just old school, dumb guy, didn't know how to change and adapt. But then after the third month, I'm like, oh yeah, the mortgage payments due. I better learn how to do comedy through the computer.
Oh,
And so
right. My children
yeah,
want money.
right. But it is one of those things you kind of learn as you go. And so I like gallery view. I like the entire group to see the entire group. I mean, if they can pin me on their screen in Zoom, but the individuals can, and the event planner can leave me, or they can do 50-50 or whatever. But I like to see them. I like to hear them. I want everybody up. I let the event planner be the co-host, and they mute people who don't realize they need to be muted, but otherwise everybody's up. Because if you don't have that full audio response, how is the event planner to know that you connected with the audience? Like I wasn't that smart the first couple I did. And I'm like, okay, we got to turn them all on. We got to have them fully participatory, in the thing. So that's the way I like to do it. And then I've learned, I've got a setup at my office where it's full background. It's 10 feet by 8 foot. I can stand up. I can perform full body, not just like this part.
Right.
And give a performance. And in that case, I think you have to be bigger than the room. In a small comedy club setting or a small corporate setting, you want to make it feel like it's a theater. And in a theater, you want to make it feel like an arena. In an arena, you want to make it feel like an intimate club gig again. Like there's all these little dynamics you have to play. But in virtual, we play really small sometimes. And I think we need to play bigger. The other thing I learned, and you've probably learned as well, is
back up. What do you? So how does that work? When you say play bigger virtually? What are you talking about?
well, if we're sitting at our desk or if we're really up close to our computer, I mean, this is all I have to work with. You don't even really see my arms or my elbow, nothing. So when you're back and you've got the right camera, good audio, and the audience can see you, and just as if you were on the stage, then it feels more like a stage performance. And the great thing is, again, you have a thing that you couldn't do live. Is you can come there's so much funny just getting up right in here sometimes, and if they've seen you full body, you've got something that, if it's a keynote and you really want them to get the takeaway and you come all the way up and you just make that extra eye contact, it stands out. It's memorable. It's different. You have more dynamics. On stage, you can get a little bit closer, but you're not going to get this close. I mean,
Right.
You're not going to get to where you can see moles and freckles, right? So learn that. Also learn that if you are kind of using the rectangle instead of the big room, anything that works on TV comedy-wise works on video. It's the same rectangle. Right bits, right top 10 list, right newscasts, fake newscasts, things you can do for the corporate client that's familiar to them on TV, but it feels 100% right in the moment with the Zoom call. You're using kind of the same technology.
And when you said you have another setup where it's where you're standing up, we can see all of you, even your feet.
Yeah, the whole 9 yards, and I can bring the camera in closer or further away, obviously, but it's the full performance. So it's not just head and shoulders. If you watch sets on late night show, it's waist up. So sometimes I'll do that for a majority of it, but I can walk up and get in frame like that. I don't have to stay back the whole time.
And your camera set on autofocus so you can move in and out.
Yeah. It's fun, but
he's smart. This guy's smart.
It's taken me a little while to figure, and I'm still learning. You still get the technical glitches. Here's another thing to do on Zoom calls if you're a speaker or a comedian or whatever. Every call I start out, before I kind of get into the meat of what I'm doing, I say, listen, we're on a Zoom call, or we're on a Skype call, or Teams, or whatever we're using today, WebEx. Have you ever been on one where there wasn't a technical glitch? No. let's set the over under. I'm guessing we'll have 7 technical glitches. It won't be any of our faults, but we're going to freeze up at some point. My mic's going to go out. Your audio's going to, let's just set it at 6. So if you think it's over, raise your hand right now. If you think it's under, raise your hand. And as we go, we'll just count them as we go. So as they happen, we're like, that's 1. We got 5 more to go. It becomes a game inside a game. But they know, they've been on calls.
Right.
They're just happy that that one's mostly working most of the time.
Yeah, the way I've been kind of thinking about virtual is this balance, because we have tremendous technologically cool tools that are at our fingertips that are now affordable in 2021. We muggles can put cool stuff in our offices. But it strikes me as like the more of those bells and whistles you add, and I think they're so cool, the more chance you move that over under up, right? The more technical glitches you are likely to have. And I haven't quite figured out where the answer is, where the sweet spot is.
Yeah, it just comes down to, I think, what serves the audience the best. If the younger generation definitely needs a little bit more bells and whistles, whether they know it or not, or whether they like to say that or not, they're just used to that kind of overstimulation. So, but an older group, I'm 52, so my age and up at least, they can still sit and watch a person one-on-one without any of that stuff. They love a good story. They love slowing things down. They love analogies and comparisons and things where they can, take their problem out of their brain for a second and see somebody else that dealt with it and how they solved it and come back and apply that. Those kinds of things still work. So I think it's kind of an age group thing to a degree, although a lot of times you get on a call and it's 18 to 84. So what are you going to do there? You kind of work both sides of it. So I think the main thing is don't have so much going on that you can't focus on what you're trying to say, that it adds to it and doesn't distract from it.
Yeah. I hear you that, younger kids are looking for a faster paced visual thing, but still people who are, 70-year-old people watch commercials and they know what CNN looks like and they know what ABC looks like, in between they know what good video is, even though they don't know how to define it. Yeah.
Well, I would say the one thing to be aware of with all groups is, 80% of the time they're probably watching on their mobile device. So when you're putting up slides that have more than a sentence, if you're putting up spreadsheets that have anything that they have to read, they're sitting in the sun or they're on the back porch or they're probably on the toilet watching what's going on, and it's this big, so you need to be the biggest thing on the screen, and those other things are, a lot of times they can't even see them. So unless they're watching back on their laptop.
Did you make up that number 80%, or is that true?
Well, I think 80% of all video is consumed on mobile devices, and if we're speaking on Zoom and all these other things, that's video. So I'm just going to bring that number right on over. Yeah, it's funny. I hadn't thought of that, because my assumption, I've read that, but just generally speaking, video is seen on a mobile. But my assumption was, if you're logging in for a Zoom meeting, wherever, you just don't want to do it on your phone, partly because you want to be able to have your phone so you can text your friends. So you can ignore the meeting. Right. But also, it's just like, all right, well, I'm going to be at this thing for an hour. I might as well fire up a laptop. Yeah, maybe it depends on the group. I'm sure corporate people are probably popping up their laptop and sitting on the couch. But again, it's not the TV screen size. It's not the full desktop size most of the time. Yeah, dang it. I think you're right. I hadn't even thought about that. Great. Now I have to worry about one more thing, Rick. Thank you. Now I can't sleep. Or one less thing. One less thing. You just don't put the graphics up that you were going to do. It's one less thing to worry about. Yeah, it's fun. For me, I feel like exactly this conversation is a pendulum. So I started out, I think, as everybody in our job, magician, comedian, motivational speaker, whatever. Great. I'll just put a camera on and do what I did live. And then I went to let the pendulum swing all the way to the other side. And it was like, oh, well, let's produce this thing. Let's make it slick. And that meant pre-recorded, and that meant a lot of things. And now it's coming back. I don't know where it's landing. Well, I think all of it's fine. It's just, we should experiment with all this stuff, and we should kind of go back and forth. Every pendulum eventually settles in the middle somewhere. It just might take a while. For us, it's taken a year to kind of go back and forth and I mean, it might take another year before it kind of settles in one spot and goes, okay, we're hybrid events forever now, whatever, whatever it
Right.
is. So yeah, I love the new technologies, but the communication is the key, regardless time, place. You just have to be clear on what you're saying.
Well, and the other side of that coin is, I think, no matter how slick your home studio is or whatever you got going, in the end, it doesn't cover up a crappy speaker, a crappy comic. A good comic is going to be good with a crappy setup.
Right, I agree. If you've got a great message and you've got a great way to deliver it, add a few bells and whistles or whatever to make it look sharp. And some clients, I'm sure, once they have one of those kinds of presentations, they expect all the presentations to have all the bells and whistles, and there's that comparison thing that comes into play. But you do what works for you, and that's what you promote, and that's what you're on your demo reel, and that's what people know they're going to get when they get you. So the people who want that will find you.
I think, though, the comparison is in our favor, and here's what I think is going on. If, like, let's imagine a corporate client brings you in for some piece of their thing. It could be a 3-day event, or it could be a 2-hour event, but that means they're seeing lots of people who are not Rik Roberts. So when you just tune in and your microphone works and your lighting's good and you have a reasonable background, you're already blowing the other ones away. Like, how come his camera's good? Mm-hmm. So even with no bells and whistles, you're already winning that comparison. So you add one bell, you're blowing away what they're used to, which is whatever came before you and whatever's right after you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the whole thing. Getting your message across clearly. But it is amazing how few people are aware that, the window should be facing you, not behind. Just like it's the same people who drive in the left lane with their blinker on and they're 10 miles under. It's the same people. They're never going to get it, and it's always going to drive us crazy.
Well, can I ask you about your setup? So where are you now? You got a pretty cool wall. You've got this setup plus another setup. What's going on? What do you got?
Yeah, so this is just my home office, just in the corner of the house here. I've got an office space I share with another guy. He's a video editor for film, so he's in there during the day a lot, never on the weekends. I go in the evenings or when he's out of town or on the weekends, and I've got just the whole space. So I've got professional like photography, lighting, and all the stuff that you need to record. I go in there and pre-record, full 1 hour custom comedy shows for groups. I do live events for them in there. But it's a nice spot because it's pretty quiet. Even when the other two people in the suite are there, they're in different rooms, doors closed, no bleed through in the audio. So that's the office I got when I had kids, to help the kids understand when I'm home, and when I'm at work, I'm at work. When I tried to do it in this office space when they were babies and when they were crawlers, and they didn't understand that I was working. It was breaking my heart. But I thought, for a little bit of money, I can go get a spot. Found a spot 8 minutes away, and when I come home, I'm home. I don't come home until I get the work done, and then there's just no confusion. So it made it clear for them. And now I'm here more now that they're at school, but I still have that space, and it's just a great spot to have.
So this shared office space, that means you're using some fancy videographer's gear.
Well, he's got the lights there. Yeah, he's already got the lighting set up.
But you still are bringing in your cameras and your computers or whatever.
Yeah, depending on the event and what they need, I can hook up my nice 4K camera to the computer, and I've got the wireless mics and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes they don't even want that. They just want pop on the computer, use the camera we've got here, the good lighting. Does great over in the office, and I just set it up, stand back, and let it rip.
We never would have had this conversation a year ago.
I was just thinking today of all, I just was working on redoing my website, and I've got 5 things I can offer now, at least virtually, that I never thought of before. I didn't even think of it before April or May of last year, because I was just thinking this whole thing was going to blow over, and I was thankful for the time to rest a little bit. But then I kind of like, okay, it really comes down to, my first thought was, what do corporate planners and church groups and people that do live events, what do they need? And so I just started calling some of my past clients. Are you guys working from home? Yeah. What's the biggest problem you have? And the word that kept coming back was connection and unity. Like, we're disconnected. We don't feel like a unit anymore. And so I just started thinking, what can I do to help them feel connected? And so I came up with these different programs, and these are valuable programs in good times too, in non-pandemic times that will still be helpful. But you just never, necessity is the mother of invention. We needed to do something, but what we needed to do is just help our clients out. That's what makes us essential, not the fact that we can still be funny, but we can still connect them. That's the bottom line.
There you are thinking of other people. Well, yeah, here's kind of to tag onto that. I think at a live meeting for a corporate group, people want to go meet people. Like, oh, I'm going to this thing and I'm nervous. I hope I meet people. I have someone to sit with. If they go out to eat, I hope someone invites me. I hope I meet someone I can say, I don't understand this breakout session. Can you explain that to me later? Yet, I suspect that most of those people say, I hate that. I'm bad at it. I'm not comfortable with it. And now forward to online, they still want those things. And now because it is genuinely difficult, they're really struggling. So having someone coach them and say, yes, we're in a group of people, but you can still connect and let me help you see how that could work. I think that really is valuable.
Yeah, at the very least, we can facilitate for them what they don't know how to do. So even if we're just hosting the Zoom call or hosting the event, that first 5 minutes of every Zoom call where people are like, are you logged in? Can you hear me? Is my microphone? All that stuff. No event planner. I mean, this wasn't on their job to do description last January. And all of a sudden now they have to be the person that's sort of a techish, person to tell them how. While they're doing that, hire a comedian. I go into some of these things. The first 5 minutes, I'm just, hey, Bob, do you know Sherry down here? Sherry, Bob, meet you. Just almost like a speed dating thing. Like, let's get to know these people. And then once we're all connected, I step back and let the event planner fire off whatever they're going to do. But there's little things like that. I love that. Yeah. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to deal with it.
Well, I've been doing breakout rooms, which astounds me. It's like all you're going to do is go to these breakout rooms, get their email. That's almost all your job is. And then you're going to have to follow up because this is how friendship works and it's harder virtually. So you got this. You're going to meet a friend. You just
have to let them know.
You just got to do it. So you're going to go and meet a friend. Here's how you do it. Get their email. Come back.
Yeah, or just simple little interviews. The average HR person isn't equipped to run an interview where you're ping-ponging two guests off of each other and finding a common thread. There's a lot of things that we can facilitate that they haven't thought about, but it helps them bring other people together. And all they have to do is connect with us to get it done.
I'd book you in a minute. Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. I'd book me first. Back to that.
Well, you did kind of book me, so thank you very much, buddy. You did book me first.
What you guys don't know is Rik is saving me with an important client, and bottom line is he's going to do it, and I'm thrilled. Thank you, Rik. My hero.
Can't wait.
I wanted to talk to you about, you and I have similar paths. You started out as a comedian and said, I want to be a speaker. And I started out as a magician or a funny magician and said, I want to be a speaker. How did you, what was that all about?
Yeah, so this is another one of those things where necessity is the mother of invention, and also just listening to see how you can serve your clients. So I had done, up until 2008, it was almost all 100. Well, it was 100% stand-up comedy. There was no, hire them as a speaker kind of thing. 2008, we get the big crash, the market crash. Bank of America has the big scandal where they're spending like $150 million at a corporate party, and they got naked people serving grapes. I mean, it was just. And I get a call from a corporate client that said, we still need you to come to our event, and we still need you to be on stage for an hour. But if we put entertainment with the way our budget looks right now and with this environment, we'll just get creamed by everybody. So can you be a speaker that's funny? And I said, what do you mean? He said, just have a topic, but we don't want laughter the whole time, just most of the time. And I said, oh yeah, I can not be funny for about 10 hours.
I can totally make your audience not laugh. Yeah. I'm awesome.
So I got a group last week that will back me up on that. And so this was an association in Mississippi. And so I just flat out asked him, I said, tell me exactly what you're looking for, and I'll let you know if I can do it. And he said, we have people who struggle with being productive, meeting deadlines, and setting goals that get them further down the line. I said, I am not a speaker on any of those topics. He goes, but the event's not for 4 months. If you can develop a topic on this, and this is what he said word for word, you've met a deadline, you've set a goal, and you've become more productive. And that's what you should put in your speech. And I was like,
Brilliant.
Okay. And then, but we agreed. I said, I'll come down there, but if it turns out to be not what you were looking for, despite my best efforts, just pay for my travel. The rest, it was a learning experience.
All right.
And so that was the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And so when I got done with the event, it went pretty good. It was a fun speech. I kind of heavily relied on slides to help me remember where I was supposed to be and all that stuff like a new speaker does. But when I got done, I get to the back of the room and this lady comes up. She goes, "Do you have a business card? I have 3 events and I need a speaker just like you." And I was like, "What?"
On your first one?
On the first, like my best comedy show ever, there was never 3, somebody came up and said, "Here's 3 more gigs just like this to do." And I said, "Really?" She goes, "Yeah, it was great. How long, And I said, "Well, this is the first time I've done it." She goes, "I wouldn't change anything." Well, I changed some things, obviously. But it kind of showed me that what they needed was a fun speech that had practical takeaways. And it wasn't, "I'm better than you." I mean, my whole speech was basically, "I didn't know how to do this. This is what I applied. This one worked. This thing didn't. Maybe this will work for you." That was my first thing. So I got that gig and I videotaped it and put that video out to some people.
Let me hold you for a second. This is so ideal because you had a client give you permission to do something new.
The green light. And I talk about this client all the time. I said, they gave me permission to fail, but they gave me the invitation to try. And you can't call somebody you don't know and ask them to do that for you. That was he was kind of in a tough spot, but he figured out a way to make it make sense for me.
But also so perfect because otherwise you're selling something you think maybe you could do, and you got to have that first client you're kind of fudging with, right?
Yeah, and I totally felt the imposter syndrome and all that stuff. I'm a speaker now and stuff like that. I didn't want to call myself a speaker. Even when I was doing the events for the first year, I was just a comedian with another way of delivering some laughs, But at the end of the day, there was a huge part, as you know, of meeting planners that need that kickoff keynote that's fun, but they want it to have some value, or they want that closing keynote where everybody's exhausted, so they need some energy, but they want it to end on a positive note, or the dreaded after lunch session where they're falling asleep and we need to get them going for the afternoon. So that was what I could provide to corporate planners, and after I got that first speech done, I found out how to do other programs and kind of find a fun theme to each one that's different, but I can still be as funny as I need to be in all those. So it works. It scratches both itches. I don't know, I'm kind of rambling here, but there's bits that I've written specifically for the speaking engagements that I'm able to use in my comedy show when I'm at a club or a theater or wherever else. It's a great place for me to experiment. And I'll even just tell them up front, I was thinking of this the other way the other day, and just say, this is a fresh thought. And if they engage with it, then I do it again. If they don't engage with it, I try to fix it. But it was just, that guy giving me the green light really changed the trajectory of my career. And in that year, more people were looking for funny speakers than they were hilarious comics. I'll tell you that much.
I was there.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was no, hey, we got lots of extra money for somebody who has no value.
Right.
Is he funny? Yeah, that's what I mean. No value. Is he? So, okay.
Yep. It's interesting how it all works.
So right now, if I say, come do a funny keynote, do you have one topic or do you say, well, I have 7. What do you want?
I've got 3 primary ones. The first is the Mayberry method, which is the first one I did. And that kind of weaves in anecdotes from the Andy Griffith Show and applies them to business. And then I kind of make that work through humor, sometimes my own stories and sometimes just stories straight from the show. And that speech has 5 different modules, basically 5 different 1-hour things that people can choose from. Or they can just take, a lot of groups just want a little bit of 3, 20 minutes on this, 20 on that. So that's my favorite. I come in as Barney Fife to kick that one off. And it's just a kick down the door, blow the whistle, arrest a few people for working too hard or leaving too early on Friday, whatever the company wants me to do. And then I step out of that character and do the speech. If they want team building, which a lot of groups do and they don't know how to facilitate that, I have a thing called Listen Up, Laugh It Up. And so the first 20 minutes is just a pure stand-up comedy show. I give them the reasons behind it, all the health benefits and endorphins, all these great things that comedy does for you. And then I get them out of their chairs in groups of like 5 or 6, and they do improvisational comedy listening exercises. They engage with each other. They celebrate when they've accomplished the goal, but they don't realize that after that group of 5 gets the goal accomplished, now we bring in another group of 5, and now 10 people try to accomplish the same goal. And I've gotten to where an entire group of 300 can accomplish the same goal that a group of 5 did. And there's a million different business applications to listening and sometimes not talking to get the job done and all these different things. Then I've got a leadership keynote that's fun. It's all based in rivalries, but it's all about leadership and becoming better teammates and better coaches and listeners. It's called Game Winning Drive. And whatever city I give it in, if it's everybody's from that city, then I really craft it to where I focus on the highlights from their teams and their players in that area and their successes and failures, and pit that against their rivals. If it's more of a national group, then there's a lot of different stories I can pull from. But those are my 3 primary. They're all fun.
And if I book you and you go and say, like, I just got my favorite job, what is your favorite way to be in front of an audience? Man,
that's a good question. I like all of the things that I just mentioned. My favorite, I think, is the Listen Up, Laugh It Up, because the way that program works, when the small groups succeed, they literally, without me telling, they just cheer. They just go, whoa, they get crazy and they love it. And that is such, for an event planner to know 100%. So the first 20 minutes they're laughing, they know that job is being taken care of. But when they see the new skill being adapted from the speaking to the exercises that these people can now take home, that to me is my favorite. There's a million reasons, but my favorite is if they get that early, if I'm the kickoff keynote speaker and they get that listening skill early, every speaker, everybody on the podium after me, everybody behind the lectern gets their message across better because they've been trained to listen, to hear, not just to respond. And that to me is, I know that they've got a skill. It will help with their family life. It'll help with everything. So that's my favorite because I know I've given them something they can use right away.
Okay, me too. So I've got similar stuff where you get the audience chatting, and that does make meeting planners happy. That was hard for me at first to realize, wait a minute, I'm being quiet and I'm not even on stage, and the meeting planner's happy. Was that a weird thing for you?
Yeah, it kind of was at first. And the very first time I did this, I'd had the idea for a while, and there was one corporate client, every 2 years, they call me up and said, you got anything new? And I said, yeah, but it's unproven. They're like, that we love it. And they agree to a slightly lower fee, but I can bring in my video crew. And so I'm getting the entire corporate event, the entire thing, 3 cameras, the whole 9 yards, recorded. So, I put a lot of effort to make sure it works so I have good footage. But yeah, I was standing around facilitating, and if I'm honest with you, the first 5 minutes when they're trying to get the game down, I'm just kind of going from pod to pod of people and just making sure they understand the roles and they're moving forward, but I'm not saying anything.
Right.
And I'll stand with the event planner and we're all looking at the groups, and they're like, this is, they never even get out of their chairs, or these people are from all over the country. They don't know each other. This is so, and I just listen to them and I'm like, oh, I got to go back to work and I got to go do what I'm supposed to do. But when that's the great trade-off in teaching. When you teach them how to do it, you don't need to talk the entire time. I think the event planners see that, and they definitely hear it. And as well as anybody, if they engage with it on that level, they're going to be talking about it at lunch. They're going to be mentioning to the event planner, man, we loved having that guy here. He gave us some energy. And I mean, at the very least, they didn't have to sit down for 40 minutes. They were actually on their feet doing something. And you've got the couple introverts that are like,
yeah.
But these exercises work with those.
There's
folks
always
too.
a couple people who have an emergency phone call, and they got to be in the hallway.
I got to take this in the hallway by Starbucks.
Did you have an experience, either a moment or something that happened over time where, all right, so 2008 comes and they say, one client says, we'd like you to be a speaker, and you've done a lot of speaking since then. Did you have a kind of a moment where you realize, holy crap, this content is good. I'm actually saying things that are smart. This is helpful. As opposed to I'm just getting a gig.
Well, early on, with that first one, so I'm embarrassed to a great degree to say I'd been doing comedy full-time for 18 years, didn't know how to run a business whatsoever. I literally pick up the phone when somebody called, go do a gig. I would send out some postcards here and there, just little things. But when this guy challenged me to set goals, to monitor productivity and all these things. I searched, I Googled, I went to the library, I got books, I called friends that knew how to do these things and just said, give me some tips. And I applied those tips. And so the first year, so it was 4 months before that speech. If you go 12 months after that, my business improved 39%. I had never even measured my business before that besides dollar amount at the end of the year minus expenses, right? But new clients, new income, it was up 39%. And the next year, a little bit more than that before it kind of settled into a groove. I just didn't know what I didn't know. So and then after that first year was up, I used that example. I was telling a meeting planner this in the hallway before the event. I'm like, the stuff I'm telling them, I know it works because it improved my business this much. He goes, I want you to tell them that the very first thing out of your mouth so that they listen. He goes, because that's what they need to hear. And I'm like, I would have never gave my permission to myself to say, my business was up 39% last year because of all. But he's like, it's practical information. So I told him everything in this speech worked for me. I deleted the stuff that didn't work. There's 20 times more content, but a lot of it didn't work. But these are the things that even I can do as a speaker with the independent business that you can apply to your approach. And so early on with that one, I realized there's some good stuff in here. The other two, after I saw them work, I realized it's the game-winning drive was the one I was least I was confident. I just didn't have a way to measure it until I did a few. And so that's where asking for feedback after the fact helped so much. I had questionnaires because I wanted to know what they thought. And the way that the event planner described that was, it was a non-confrontational, non-judgmental way to fix what's going wrong in our company. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? He's like, if you would have come in and said, sales team, you guys are horrible. You're down 50% this year, and leadership, their turnover rate's crazy. He said, you didn't do that. You gave us examples of other people in organizations that were going through those things, and we could see how to fix those things from those examples. So I'm like, good. I want more. Then I kind of retooled it and put more examples in like that. I didn't know enough about these companies to finger point or any of that, and not that I would, but right. The way that he encapsulated it, I'm like, oh, this is where the value is. Right. They can solve problems from other people's problems, which is pretty common, but just from the sports approach, it was reassuring that I could use stories that happened last night in the ball game. Even if they didn't see the ball game, I'd recap it, and then we could learn from that.
All right, how personal are you in your speaking? Like, for example, you said, here's the deal with my business, and I grew my business by 39, but are you telling, like, deep personal stuff about the Rik Roberts saga?
You know what? Despite a lot of advice that I have gotten over the years, I do share a ton of personal examples. That is what connects with my audiences. I know I've gone to many meetings at NSA and different places where like, you shouldn't talk about yourself on stage. You should talk about the audience. Well, the audience relates to your story or your family story or your successes and failures. And that's what I'm an expert on. My life, I'm not an expert in life. I'm an expert on what I've learned from life. And my groups, that's what they connect with. I'm sure it's not the same for every speaker, especially the ones giving me the advice to remove that stuff. But I want them to know me. The one comment I get probably the most after an event is, I felt like I knew this guy for 10 years already. Like, I felt like he's an old soul that's been in my circle. So that's how I connect. Other speakers do it differently, but that's what I've learned.
This is Rik. This is Brad. We are spirit animals in line. I'm going to ask you in a second what gives you hope, but I'm going to yammer a second because I want to give you a chance to think about it.
Sure.
When I first started speaking, Rik, my whole take was I just felt like such a fraud. And so I was talking about business examples. Oh, I read this book about Southwest Airlines. They have a good attitude and culture. And then now I don't do any of that. I'm only talking about stuff that happened to me or to the people I know and love. And it took me forever to figure out this is okay. Meaning the imposter part thought, I'm not giving hardcore business examples, so therefore this sucks. And what I'm learning is they're hearing hardcore business examples through my stories. And that was a major mind shift, realizing, no, it's okay. You can talk about your kid. As long as you tie it in, you can talk about your kid. And because I've never been a CEO, I probably ought to talk about my kid as opposed to a case study that I read in ink.
Yeah, I mean, I did the same thing. I was the first speech, especially. I was quoting these studies and these things. Gallup polls and
Right.
these kinds
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
things. Well, the reality is they don't connect with that because you didn't connect with it. You researched it and found it, but it's not part of your life. It's not part of your daily routine. So the personal stories. If I guess if I've learned one thing over the years that is kind of, I guess it's obvious in some ways, but not in others, is that when I'm telling personal stories, I'm actually more excited on stage because I know the people in these stories. I'm more visual on stage because I've been side by side with these people. I've seen the location where the story takes place. The whole thing is a higher performance level because it's real. I'm not fabricating it and try to,
Right.
be theatrical where it seems like I should. I'm replaying it, and that's what connects. I mean, I literally picture my family portrait on stage, and if I ever get blank for some reason, I just go, oh, I haven't talked about my wife, I haven't talked about, but that always relates to. I don't need to go research and memorize facts and stuff. I've got the
Right.
life history like you do to pull from, and that's what they can't get from any other speaker. They can get the same Gallup poll results from anybody, but they can't get how Brad handled this birthday party when things went crazy. But at the end, everybody was happy because they got a better present than what was in the box, or whatever it is. Did that happen? Did you have a birthday?
I was just thinking, I'm going to write that story up. That sounds good. Hey, Rick, how did that story go about my kids?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think sometimes too, Rick, that what we are on stage, especially in front of corporate groups, not in a club, we're a role model. Meaning, like, oh, he's up there talking about soft, fuzzy ideas. He's talking about feelings. He's talking about, what it felt like when this happens. And he's trying to create feelings in me. No one coaches them that way. They're like strategies and tactics. And someone to say, like, I bet you need a hug, metaphorically, or I bet you need to give a hug, metaphorically. They don't get that. So when they hear us going like, oh, yeah, I learned this from my kid. Who knew? Yeah,
Yeah.
flip me out. I didn't expect it.
Yeah, you're right. Especially once they get to a certain level in corporate leadership, they've been taught subliminally to not be emotionally involved in anything, so they can just focus on the bottom line results. But they're like the bones, we're like the tissue, or they're like the whatever, and we're the blood. We have to help them connect that stuff to the humans. They just forget. There was a time in comedy clubs. I remember, I saw this. I was working with a guy, and I think it was St. Louis. He destroyed. I'd never seen anybody do such a good show. It was clean, and at the end of the week, we got paid out, and he's walking out with his head hung kind of low. I'm like, "What's the matter, man? It's a killer week." He goes, "He didn't even give me an attaboy or nice job or nothing when he paid me out." And then I found out that particular chain told and trained their managers to never tell a comedian that they did an excellent job because then they would ask for more money.
So you did great. Best ever. This has been the best week we've had in 3 months. They don't.
Yeah.
That's
No,
cold.
because then you go, "Oh, bring me back. A few more bucks in my pocket. Wouldn't that be good?" They never did that. So it was just, there you go. We'll see you next time. Well, that's just.
Yeah, what they don't know is that would just nourish us and say, like, listen, I can't pay you as much as those other clubs, but we love you here. If a week opens and you like a good club, we like you a lot. That would go a long way, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and sometimes I learned to coach it out of them. Not to coach the compliment, but to see what they were thinking. I would, once I got to where I was headlining clubs, then I really wanted to keep that position. I didn't want to go backwards, and I wanted to grow. So I just would say, "What would you like to see different from me next time?" And sometimes they just say, "What you did was fine. Just some new stories, new jokes, whatever. But you're on the right track." Sometimes they go, "Man, how about less crowd work, or more crowd work, or less guitar, or more guitar?" Just every club had a different thing of what worked. I was doing what I was doing, but until I started asking, "What would you like to see next time?" And sometimes it was, "You need to get on radio more and build a bigger following so we can sell more tickets. We like having you here, but if you want to make more, we have to have more people paying full price to get in the seats." Stuff like that. That to me was as beneficial as you crushed it. I mean, that's an empty thing.
That's pretty tactical information. Well, if you do this, I can give you a raise.
Yeah. So I do that with my corporate clients in the follow-up. What would you have preferred I do differently? Or, if you wanted to hire me for another program, aside from this one, what would it be? Just different questions to kind of find out what they're thinking and where you can help out. And if I can't, then I recommend guys like Brad or somebody else that's in their wheelhouse of what they're looking for.
You're a good man. Thank you for saying yes to this. I feel like I could go on for hours. The more I know you, Rik, the more I like you. That's a good sign.
What can I do differently next time?
Well, come on, there are those people you're like, I thought I liked him more until I met him. Once I really started to know him, loser, don't like him at all. You're the opposite.
Well, thanks. And likewise, too, I'm just glad to hop on here. There's, especially this year, I'm never going to use the term now more than ever. But especially
in these difficult times.
Yeah. I miss what these companies miss. I miss connecting with people, being unified with my other speakers and comedians and entertainers out there. So as with all the drawbacks that Zoom and technology has, stuff like this is excellent. I'm glad you had me on today.
Well, what's fun for me is I have all these notes about what I'm going to ask you. I don't think I asked one of them because you're just more interesting than anything on there.
Thanks,
all right,
man.
I like to end these interviews the same way with the same question, no matter who I'm talking to. So here we are. Rik Roberts, comedian, motivational speaker, rock star. What gives you hope?
I think silence. This year I've had more silence, more quiet, and there's so many things to reflect upon that I'm excited about moving forward with. I've got journals now full since March since I've had time to write it, just reconnecting with where I am in life and what I can do and what I've learned and what I still need to learn. And that journey gives me a lot of hope because as much as I like the programs I'm doing right now and the comedy I'm telling, I just know there's a ton more. Where probably back in February, March, I felt like I was kind of tapped out. Like I'm telling them everything I know how to tell them. But I've had that silence to kind of listen, kind of recalibrate, and figure out, things I can do from here on out. So, the vaccine also gives me hope if enough people take it that I can get back in front of people and connect with them and help them that way. But if not, I tell you, there's enough things we can do online to help others that gives me hope too. It just doesn't have to be in person all the time, right? But I miss that part a lot.
Silence. That's a good one.
It's hard for speakers and comedians to have silence.
Yeah. That is I would have expected that, but I love that. Silence.
I'm trying to be silent in between responses, but yes, we're always, I can give you a million more examples. I know we're wrapping up, but in comedy, I used to fear silence. I used to fear that it would lead to me forgetting what's next, or I felt if I didn't talk for 3 seconds, everybody would get up and leave the room. Like I just felt that in the back of my mind. I was afraid to take a full sip of water because I thought, man, they're going to think this is boring. The gold is in the silence. The gold is hearing what's in between the sentences and giving yourself to reflect on what you just heard or what you just said or how they just reacted. That gives you your next steps, not what you have planned. Like you said, just a piece of paper. That's what you go to if everything else isn't working, everything else isn't developing organically. And that's great to have, but the organic stuff that's what gives me hope. Just silence, figuring out where to go.
When I grow up, I want to be like you.
Well, there's a lot of other things that we didn't talk about. You probably don't want to be part of.
I know you're headed out on a bike ride. Rik Roberts, RikRoberts.com. Dude, let me know when I get to be helpful for you. I'm so grateful that you were here.
Yeah, we'll get back on the line together to do something here pretty soon, I'm sure. So thanks again for the gig you gave me, and we'll talk soon, bud.
Thanks, everyone. Rik, hold on with me. You guys rock. Wash your hands.